Chapter 5: Kaida's Journey. The city of Shalana was a maze of stone and shadow, where narrow alleys twisted and turned like serpents coiling through a graveyard. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, casting the city in an eerie half-light. Flickering lanterns swung in the cold breeze, painting the cobbled streets in a dance of dim yellow and deep black. Overhead, looming towers of darkened stone cast long, foreboding shadows, as if the city itself held its breath, waiting for nightfall to reveal its hidden secrets. Kaida Night Whisper moved through the streets like a ghost. Her hood was pulled low over her eyes, her leather boots making barely a sound on the wet stones. She was no stranger to places like this, cities with secrets buried beneath layers of deceit, where every shadow held a knife and every corner was an opportunity. She had grown up in places like this, and if there was one thing she had learned, it was that knowledge was the greatest weapon of all. Tonight, she hunted for information about the Luminaris gem, a relic whispered to be both powerful and dangerous. She'd heard rumors of a hidden library deep within the city, a repository of forgotten knowledge guarded by more than just locks and keys. If there was anywhere she could find a clue, it would be there. But Shalana was also a city of thieves and spies. She had felt eyes on her since she first set foot here, a prickling at the back of her neck, the kind that told her she was not as alone as she seemed. As she rounded a corner into a particularly dark alley, she heard a rustle in the shadows. Her hand flew to the hilt of her dagger, her senses sharpening. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a creature low to the ground, moving with a predator's grace. The moonlight briefly caught its eyes, reflecting a soft, golden glow. It was a female dark elm fox, her sleek fur nearly blending with the night itself, save for a few hints of deep mahogany. Kaida's tension eased slightly. She had seen the fox before, trailing her for days. She had thought it a coincidence at first, but now she wondered if there was more to it. The fox regarded her with cautious curiosity, its head tilted slightly as if trying to gauge her intentions. "Looks like you've made up your mind," Kaida whispered, slowly crouching to meet the fox's gaze. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small strip of dried meat, holding it out on her palm. The fox hesitated, then crept forward, her nose twitching. With a quick, deft movement, she snatched the offering and retreated a few steps, still watching her carefully. "Suit yourself," she said with a smirk, straightening up. "But keep up and don't get in my way." The fox, as if understanding her words, began to follow her more closely, padding silently at her heels as she continued deeper into the maze of Shalana. The hidden library was not marked on any map. It was said to exist only in whispered conversations between those who dealt in forbidden knowledge. Kaida's contacts had given her enough hints to piece together its location. A crumbling, abandoned building nestled between two crooked towers, its entrance hidden behind a facade of thick ivy and moss. As she approached, she noticed faint, glowing runes etched into the stonework, almost invisible to the untrained eye. A ward, meant to keep out the uninvited. She glanced around. The street was empty. Kaida muttered a soft incantation under her breath, her fingers tracing a sigil in the air. The runes flickered and faded. She pressed forward, picking the lock with deft precision. Inside, the library was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of old parchment and dust. Rows of towering bookshelves stretched into the shadows, filled with scrolls, tomes, and relics from ages long past. Kaida's eyes narrowed as she moved, her fingers grazing the spines of the books. She needed a clue, a reference to the Luminaris gem and its last known location. The fox moved alongside her, her body low and alert. Suddenly, her ears twitched, and she darted off into the darkness. Kaida's heart quickened. She knew to trust an animal's instincts, especially one like this. She followed, careful not to make a sound. The fox led her to a secluded section of the library, where an eerie chill hung in the air. Here, behind a tattered tapestry, Kaida found a small, hidden alcove. Inside, a dusty pedestal held a half-burned scroll, untouched by time. Her breath caught as she unrolled it. There, scrawled in ancient, fading ink, were references to the Luminaris gem and a cryptic note about an unseen watcher. Before she could study it further, she heard a noise, a faint creak of wood from the entrance. Her hand went to her dagger, and she slipped behind a nearby column. The fox remained motionless, perfectly hidden in the shadows. A group of masked thieves entered, their eyes scanning the room. They were armed, and they moved with the confidence of those who had done this many times before. Kaida cursed silently. They must have been following her trail, thinking she had already found something valuable. "There's nowhere to hide, rogue," one of the thieves called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Hand over the scroll and we'll make this quick." Kaida's lips curled into a sly smile. "Promises? Promises," she whispered to herself. The next moment was a blur of motion. Kaida darted from her hiding spot, flipping a heavy tome off a shelf to crash into the nearest thief. The fox, as if sensing her plan, sprang into action, weaving between the attacker's legs and tripping them up. Blades flashed in the dim light, but Kaida was always a step ahead, using the shelves as cover and the darkness to her advantage. The thieves, disoriented by the sudden assault and the elusive fox, became reckless. Kaida saw her opening. She bolted for a side window, her body moving fluidly through the chaos. The fox was right behind her, leaping out just as she did. Outside, the city stretched out beneath them, a sprawling labyrinth of rooftops and chimneys. Kaida didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the rooftops, leaping over gaps and ducking under low-hanging clotheslines. The thieves were quick, but she was quicker. The dark elm fox moved alongside her like a shadow, her every step sure and swift. They ran like this for what felt like hours, until at last they found themselves atop a high, secluded rooftop. Kaida stopped, panting, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at the fox, who seemed remarkably unfazed by the ordeal. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" she said, half joking. The fox merely looked back at her, her eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. Kaida pulled out the half-burned scroll and studied it in the pale light. It mentioned an ancient ruin deep within a forbidden forest, her next destination. But what struck her most was the note about an unseen watcher. Was it a warning or a clue? She looked at the fox again. There was something almost purposeful about her presence. She wondered if she had been guided to her, or perhaps the fox was guiding her. Either way, Kaida felt the fox's importance in her journey. "Looks like we're stuck with each other. If we're going to be hanging out together, you're going to need a name," she said, tucking the scroll into her belt. "How's Nick sound?" The fox tilted her head, as if amused, then trotted ahead, leading her to the edge of the rooftop. Below, the city continued its restless slumber, unaware of the new alliance formed above. Kaida smiled and nodded, knowing the path ahead would only get more treacherous, but she was ready. With Nyx at her side, she felt the shadows whispering secrets only they could hear. And so they moved forward, disappearing into the night, a rogue and her dark-furred companion, bound by fate, driven by mystery.